Greetings and welcome to the 5th episode of Morrowind Modding Reviews, and also the second part of our Hlaalu Retexture series. And in case you're wondering, that is how I'm going to be pronouncing the word Hlaalu from now on. I know a lot of you were complaining last time about my pronunciation of it, and I hope this is better. If it isn't, I'm just going to wing it, and we're going to keep it as Hlaalu. Anyway, we do have 5 Hlaalu text replaces for you in this episode. There's quite a wide variety of them, and the first one we're doing is Ultimate Textures Hlaalu Architecture by GR Vulture. Now, this is a sort of traditional retexture set of the Hlaalu architecture, and you'll notice that's very much in keeping with the sort of typical color scheme you might come to expect from Hlaalu architecture, very similar to how it looks in vanilla Morrowind. And this retexture set also includes the doors and windows of Hlaalu architecture, which is very nice since a lot of retexture packs don't include that sort of thing. And you may also notice that the buildings of the Hlaalu architecture set are just the tiniest bit imposing with this retexture package. There's sort of these strong walls that give off the sort of emphasis of how strong Great House Hlaalu was during this time period. Now, if you know your lore, you know that Great House Hlaalu sort of collapsed after the Red Year. But here in the Third Era, they were sort of at their golden age. They were one of the strongest houses in Morrowind at this time period, and this really, I think, highlights that. Now, in terms of interior textures, you've got this nice, interesting pattern thing going around near the top of the ceiling. The floors and the top of the ceiling are a bit more of a plain texture, and the walls are very similar to the exteriors. Something that I should mention is that the interior door textures are actually from a different texture package. They just all sort of got mixed in together by accident. But anyway, the interior textures are very nice. And overall, I would say that this mod has some really great quality textures for exteriors and interiors. It's very lore friendly, and I really do think it sort of amplifies the strength of Hlaalu architecture with this sort of imposing stonework. So overall, I give it a 5 out of 5, and I recommend it for players who are looking for something that's lore friendly, but also highlights the strength of Hlaalu. Which is something you might want in your game if you're playing with a Hlaalu character or something of that nature. Next up is Zach G's Hlaalu Retexture by Zach G. Now, this is a sort of very different Hlaalu retexture when compared to the last one. It doesn't have that traditional color scheme. Instead, it has a bit more of a whitish color scheme. And you'll notice that it sort of has this sort of painted-on plaster look to it, with this stone tile work on the sides, as you can see with that built-in there in Saran. And this is a look that I think does really work well for the Hlaalu architecture set, even though it's very different from the vanilla color scheme. And it does also include the doors and windows of Hlaalu architecture, which is always something I should point out, because, you know, not every retexture set covers that, as I mentioned before. And sort of taking a close-up on these textures, you can sort of see that painted-on plaster look I was talking about before. Now, the interior textures are absolutely fantastic, I think. You've got these sort of patterns on the floor, you've got patterns on the ceiling, and up there towards the top of the walls. And even down here on the floor, towards the bottom of the wall, you have this sort of pattern that goes around the room, which all looks very nice, a sort of high detail quality there. And the wall textures are, of course, more of that sort of plaster feel that you see on the exterior. And I gotta say that I really love the interior textures in this texture set. They look fantastic. Anyway, overall, there are some really great looking textures. Those textures for both windows and doors, which again, not every texture set has that, so always needs to be pointed out. Generally excellent interior textures. I absolutely love the interior textures in this texture set. And this is generally lore friendly, even though it has a sort of different color scheme vibe than what you typically expect from Great House Hlaalu. So overall, I give this a 5 out of 5, and I do recommend it for players who are looking for something a bit more whitish in the color scheme for Hlaalu architecture, and perhaps want something different. Now our third mod is Hlaalu Text Replacer Red Marble by Conajo. And this is sort of another white-like themed text replacer for the Hlaalu architecture set, as you can see here, the city of Saran. And as the name of the mod would imply, it sort of adds this red marble outline to the buildings. And not only that, it also adds this sort of a green stone trim around the red marble outline, as you can see here with the buildings and bridges of Balmora. And I actually think that this works really well together. The green stone trim just sort of enhances the feel of the red marble textures. And also it should be noted that this mod does include textures for the Hlaalu doors and windows as well. Though the Hlaalu doors are just a bit too bright red for my liking. And right here you can sort of see a close-up of the exterior textures, which includes a combination of white marble and white plaster. And here with the interior textures, you'll notice that there's this really nice looking tiled floor texture, and a really great looking white marble texture for the upper walls, and the lower walls have this white plaster texture that you've seen on the exterior. And the ceilings are composed of a more tiled green marble texture, with that red marble texture just sort of outlining the walls a bit. And overall, there's some really great textures here. Definitely excellent interior textures. The greenstone trim really works well for the exterior texture design. And overall, my only complaint is that the doors are just a bit too bright red. So my overall score is a 4.9 out of 5. And I recommend this mod for players looking for a white-themed text replacer, but something that's also a bit different. Now our next mod is Aztec Hlaalu by Tiger Wolf. Now this is a vastly different text replacer from the ones we've been showing previously, that more or less completely changes the look and feel of Hlaalu architecture, as you can see here at the city of Saran. And this mod just sort of adds a Aztec stone-like texture to the Hlaalu buildings. And as you'll notice with the manor here in Saran, it's a sort of a grey stone-like texture, which is a bit hard to tell with this evening lighting setting. But you can get a bit of a better look here with the city of Balmora. And it should be noted that this mod does not have any Hlaalu door textures or window textures, so those are both ones from the red marble text replacer that we just showed. And you'll notice that there is a ground cover texture for the plaza here that's included in this mod. And a bit more of a close-up of the textures, you'll notice that there's this bit of a artistic pattern here. Not exactly very high resolution, it's kind of low resolution. Interior textures look pretty good though. You've got these sort of patterned tiles on the floor, and more plain walls and ceilings. The walls are basically that grey stone texture. And the ceilings are likewise more of a grey stone texture. And overall, there are some great stone textures in this mod. It works pretty well with the Hlaalu tile set, and there's some good interior textures as well. It includes ground cover textures, which not every mod does, obviously. The previous mods we've shown didn't, for example. It's not exactly very lore friendly though, and there are no door or window textures included. But overall, I give this a 5 out of 5, and I recommend it for players who really want something very different and don't mind a not exactly lore-friendly texture replacer. Finally, for our last mod, we have Phelan's Egyptian Hlaalu Retexture by Phelan. Now this is very similar actually to the Aztec texture replacer we just showcased, only this time we have Egyptian stone retextures to the Hlaalu architecture set instead of Aztec. And this is sort of more fitting for the Hlaalu color scheme, at least traditionally, as that sort of more sandstone, yellow color scheme that you kind of expect of Hlaalu architecture. And the stonework here is, pretty high resolution, I would say. It looks really well with Hlaalu built-ins. And it does include a new window textures and new door textures as well. And you'll also notice, sort of on the side of these buildings here, you've got these sort of traditional Egyptian patterns. Now this isn't exactly lore-friendly, but it works well, I think, even if it does detract from the lore a little bit. Here's a bit of a close-up of those textures. Now with the interior textures, you'll notice that the floors are actually a bit of a wood texture, which again might not be lore-friendly. The upper walls are this sort of dotted pattern, and the ceiling is like this royal blue texture, which looks pretty great, I got to say. And the walls here are of course more this sandstone-like texture. And let's just get a close-up on these doors, because these are pretty high-resolution door textures. You got that sort of eagle knob frame going on there. And overall, I'd say these interior textures are really great looking. And so overall, great looking exterior and interior textures. It includes door and window textures, which not every mod does. We've gone over that several times now. The door textures are of particularly high quality. It's not exactly lore friendly though, so you have to keep that in mind. Overall, I'd give this a 5 out of 5, and I recommend it for players wanting something very different, but also something more in line with the traditional Hlaalu color scheme, as this is definitely a fairly similar color scheme to vanilla Morrowind. Now anyway, that pretty much concludes our episode. We do have 3 more episodes in the Hlaalu texture replacer set, but next week we're going to cover, I believe it's Talvani textures, and I know there's been some demand for Daedric textures as well, and we're going to get around to that eventually. So anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, do leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.